Here's something nobody tells you. Ancient humans probably smelled better than the people who came thousands of years after them. I know how that sounds. We picture cavemen as filthy, reeking, swamp creature versions of ourselves. But the truth is, in some very specific and surprising ways, a hunter-gatherer 40,000 years ago may have smelled cleaner, fresher, and less offensive than a peasant in a crowded medieval city, or honestly, than you do after a day eating modern food. The reasons why are buried in your sweat glands, your gut, and the trillions of bacteria living on your skin right now. This is the story of what ancient humans actually smelled like. And by the end, I promise you're going to smell your own arm. At least once, and think very differently about what you find. Let's start by killing the myth, because it's a strong one. When you imagine an ancient human, you imagine a smell. A bad one. Unwashed, greasy, rank. A creature that hasn't seen soap. Because soap hasn't been invented, sweating into the same fur for years. And look, parts of that are fair. They didn't shower. They didn't have deodorant. But the assumption underneath it, the idea that not washing automatically equals overwhelming stench, turns out to be far more complicated than you think. Because the thing producing most of that smell you're imagining isn't dirt, and it isn't even really sweat. It's something alive. And ancient humans had a very different relationship with it than you do. So let's talk about where body odor actually comes from. Because almost everyone gets this wrong. Here's the first surprise. Sweat, by itself, is basically odorless. Pure sweat is mostly water and salt, and if you could somehow sweat into a perfectly sterile environment, you'd produce almost no smell at all. The stink doesn't come from the sweat, it comes from what eats the sweat. You have two main types of sweat gland. The first, eccrine glands, are all over your body, and they pump out that thin, watery sweat that cools you down. Mostly harmless, mostly odorless. The second type is the interesting one. Apocrine glands. These are concentrated in specific places, your armpits, your groin, around the nipples, and they don't kick in until puberty, which is your first clue that they're not really about cooling you down at all. They're about signaling. Apocrine glands secrete a thicker, richer fluid, loaded with proteins and fats and lipids, and that fluid, on its own, is also nearly odorless when it first comes out. So where's the smell? It's the bacteria. Your skin is a teeming ecosystem, home to billions of microorganisms, and certain species of them absolutely feast on the rich secretions from your apocrine glands. They break those proteins and fats down into smaller molecules, and those molecules, the waste products of bacteria eating your sweat, are what your nose registers as body odor. Read that again. The smell of a human armpit is not the smell of a human. It's the smell of a thriving bacterial colony having dinner. You are not the stink. You are the restaurant. And this changes everything about how we think about ancient body odor, because it means the question isn't really, how dirty were they? The question is, what was living on their skin, and what was it eating? And the answer to that is genuinely different from the answer for you. But before we get to that, I have to show you something that sounds made up, and isn't. There is a single gene that acts like an on-off switch for human body odor. It's called ABCC11, and depending on which version of it you inherited, your apocrine glands either work the normal smelly way, or they barely work at all. People with one particular variant of this gene produce very little of the rich secretion that skin bacteria love, which means they have dramatically reduced body odor. Not they wash more. Genetically, biochemically, less to smell. And here's the part that gets people. This exact same gene also controls the type of earwax you have. The smelly armpit version of the gene gives you wet, sticky, yellowish earwax. The low odor version gives you dry, flaky, crumbly earwax. They are perfectly linked because they're the same switch controlling the same kind of gland. So right now, you could check your own earwax and make a pretty good guess about whether you're genetically inclined to have strong body odor or almost none. Your ears are telling on your armpits. They have been the whole time. Now, why does this matter for ancient humans? Because that low odor version of the gene isn't randomly scattered. It's overwhelmingly common in East Asian populations and rare in people of African and European descent. And by mapping where the gene is common and tracing its likely origins, geneticists can make educated inferences about deep population history, about which ancient groups, tens of thousands of years ago, were already carrying the genetic blueprint for low body odor. We have to be careful here. Genes don't give us a perfect time-stamped photograph, but the pattern strongly suggests that the variation in human body odor we see today, the fact that some humans naturally smell strong and others barely register, is not a modern quirk. It's ancient. It was already being shuffled through human populations deep in prehistory. Some ancient humans, genetically, would have been nearly odorless. The all cavemen reeked assumption fails on the genetics alone. But genes are only the start. Let's talk about the surprising stuff. The reasons an ancient human might have actually smelled less bad than you'd guess. And the first one is sitting on your plate. Your body odor is powerfully shaped by what you eat. This isn't folklore, it's chemistry. The food you consume gets broken down into compounds, some of which are volatile, meaning they evaporate, and some of those leave your body through your breath and your skin. Eat a lot of garlic. You smell of garlic, not from your mouth, from your pores. And here is the thing about the modern diet. It is absolutely loaded with the kinds of things that change how we smell. Enormous quantities of sugar, refined carbohydrates, processed seed oils, dairy, alcohol, ultra-processed everything. Diets heavy in sugar and processed food can alter body chemistry and feed particular populations of odor-producing bacteria. Heavy red meat consumption has been shown, in actual studies, to make human body odor rated as stronger and less pleasant by others. We are, chemically, what we eat. And we eat like no humans in history ever have. An ancient hunter-gatherer ate none of that. No refined sugar, no processed oils. No bread, no dairy in most populations, no alcohol beyond the occasional accident of fermented fruit. Their diet was lean meat, fish, foraged plants, tubers, nuts, seasonal fruit. A diet that, by every modern measure, produces a milder, less acrid body chemistry. So before they even did anything, an ancient human's baseline smell was probably softer and less sharp than a modern person living on convenience food. The caveman ate cleaner than you do. Sit with that one. Then there's the matter of what was and wasn't trapping the smell. Think about why your gym clothes smell so much worse than your skin. Fabric, especially synthetic fabric, traps moisture and dead skin, and gives odor-producing bacteria a damp, warm, sheltered place to multiply. Body odor clings to clothing and intensifies in it. Now, ancient humans did wear clothing, hides and later woven fibers, but they wore far less of it in warm climates. And crucially, they were not sealed head to toe in the same sweat-soaked synthetic layers all day. A largely bare body in open air, sweat evaporating freely, is a very different odor environment than a body wrapped in damp gym wear on a crowded train. In a lot of conditions, ancient humans were better ventilated than you are right now. And then there's the smoke. This one's strange and a bit wonderful. Ancient humans lived their entire lives near fire. They cooked with it, slept beside it, huddled around it, and that means they were constantly, perpetually marinating in wood smoke. Their hair, their skin, their clothing, all of it would have carried a deep, permanent smell of smoke. Now, you might think that's just another bad smell to add to the pile, but consider two things. First, wood smoke is a genuine antimicrobial. Smoking meat preserves it by killing and inhibiting bacteria, and the same smoke settling onto skin and hair would have suppressed some of the very bacteria that produce body odor. Ancient humans may have been, in effect, lightly smoke-cured. And second, a smoky smell is, to the human nose, not remotely as offensive as the sour, sulfurous reek of heavy bacterial body odor. If you've ever come home from a bonfire, you know the smell. It's warm. It's kind of comforting. There's a real chance that the dominant scent of an ancient human wasn't rancid sweat at all. It was campfire. So let's assemble this surprising picture. A lean, unprocessed diet producing mild body chemistry. A largely bare, well-ventilated body. A permanent, mildly antibacterial coating of wood smoke. And in some populations, a genetic predisposition to barely produce body odor in the first place. Add it up, and the hunter-gatherer standing in front of you might smell less like a swamp monster and more like a person who'd been camping for a week. Earthy, smoky, a little musky, not pleasant by the standards of a scented modern bathroom, but a long, long way from the cartoon stench we imagine. Now, I promised you honesty, the way I always try to, so I'm not going to let them off completely. Because in other ways, ancient humans absolutely did smell, and some of it was genuinely rough. Start with the mouth. Ancient humans had no toothbrushes, no floss, no dentists. And while their low-sugar diet meant far fewer cavities than you might expect, plenty of ancient skeletons show serious dental disease, abscesses, gum infection, rotting teeth. Tooth decay and gum infection produce a very specific, very foul breath, and for an ancient human with an abscess, that smell would have been constant and strong. So the breath situation was, in many cases, not great. Then there are wounds. In a world before antibiotics, infected cuts, abscesses, and festering injuries were common, and infected flesh has a smell that is unmistakable and awful. A band of ancient humans likely included, at any given time, someone carrying the heavy, sweetish reek of an infection. There was illness, there was diarrheal disease, there was no plumbing. These are not gentle smells. And here's the crucial reframe, the bit that resolves the whole paradox. Clean and smelly are not absolute. They're relative and they're cultural. An ancient human carried smells that you would find strong because you have been raised in an aggressively deodorized world, a world of scented soap and laundry detergent and antiperspirant and air freshener, a world where the natural smell of a human body has been almost entirely scrubbed out of daily life. To you, an unwashed person smells shocking, but to an ancient human, surrounded since birth by the smell of smoke and bodies and earth and animals, none of it would have registered as remarkable at all. It was simply the smell of being alive, the smell of people. They weren't holding their noses, they were home. If anything, the truly catastrophic human smells came much later. And this is where the medieval peasant beats the caveman, in the worst possible way. When humans started crowding into permanent settlements and then cities, packing thousands of bodies together with no sewage system, no waste removal, animals living indoors, streets running with filth, that is, when human environments became genuinely dangerously foul. A hunter-gatherer band of 30 people moving across an open landscape, leaving their waste behind them as they went, lived in a far fresher-smelling world than a medieval city dweller, breathing the concentrated stench of 10,000 neighbors. Civilization, in a very real sense, made us smell worse. The caveman had the whole clean outdoors. The peasant had the gutter. But here's where the story gets genuinely profound. Because smell, for ancient humans, was not just an ambient fact of life. It was information. It was technology. It was one of the most important senses they had, and we have spent the last few thousand years going progressively blind to it. We tend to think of ourselves as visual creatures, with a weak sense of smell, and compared to a dog, sure, but human smell is far more powerful than we give it credit for. And for an ancient human, it was doing constant, vital work. Scent told them whether food was safe or spoiled long before they tasted it. Scent told them whether a fire was dying, whether rain was coming, whether a predator or prey animal had passed through. And, most fascinatingly of all, scent told them about each other. Here's one of my favorite pieces of science. Buried in your DNA is a cluster of genes involved in your immune system, and it turns out that these genes also influence the way you smell. Your individual scent signature. And there's evidence that humans can subconsciously detect this through smell, and that we tend to be attracted to the body odor of people whose immune genes are different from our own. There's a famous study where women smelled t-shirts worn by different men, and rated the smell of men with dissimilar immune genes as more pleasant. The logic, evolutionarily, is beautiful. Pairing with someone whose immune system is different from yours gives your potential children a broader, stronger immune defense. Which means that, on some level, beneath all conscious thought, we may choose who we're drawn to, partly by smell, and the thing we're unknowingly sniffing out is genetic compatibility. Now scale that back to an ancient human. They were running this system at full power. In a world with no perfume to mask it, no soap to strip it, no deodorant to override it, the natural scent of another person was right there, broadcasting health, diet, hormonal state, genetic makeup, in a chemical language. No one consciously understood, but everyone was fluent in. When an ancient human felt drawn to someone, part of what was pulling them was a smell, and that smell was carrying real, usable biological information. Their noses were doing matchmaking, threat detection, and quality control on their food all day, every day. Smell wasn't the embarrassing sense. Smell was a survival instrument. And scent did more than that. It marked kin. Mothers can identify their infants by smell, and infants their mothers, and that's ancient, essential bonding chemistry. It likely marked group identity, the shared smell of a band that lived together, ate the same food, sat by the same fire. To belong to a group was, in part, to smell like it. Your people were, quite literally, the people who smelled like home. So, when you zoom all the way out, what did ancient humans smell like? The honest answer is a layered, complicated thing. They smelled of wood smoke, first and most of all. Of earth and animal hide and the particular musk of an unwashed but unprocessed body. Of whatever they'd last eaten and the fire they'd last sat beside. Some of them, genetically, barely smelled at all. Some carried the sharp note of a bad tooth or a healing wound. None of them smelled like a modern human, because no modern human smells like a human anymore. We have erased our own scent so thoroughly that the natural smell of our own species now strikes us as a problem to be solved. And that's the part I keep coming back to. We didn't just lose the strong smells, we lost the information. We walk around in a deodorized bubble, our most ancient social sense muffled almost to silence, and we barely notice it's gone. The ancient human reading a dozen invisible messages in a single breath of air would find us baffling, a species walking around with one of its oldest senses switched off on purpose. So here's where it comes back to you. That smell under your arm, the one you'll probably check, the moment this video ends, is not dirt and it's not failure. It's the same ancient signal your ancestors broadcast around the fire. 40,000 years ago, the living output of bacteria and genes and diet, a chemical signature as unique to you as your face. We've spent a fortune learning to hide it. They spent their whole lives reading it. And of the two of us, I'm honestly not sure who understood the human body better. So here's my question for you. If you could smell the world the way an ancient human did, reading people and food and danger in the air, would you want that sense back? Or are you glad it's gone? Let me know in the comments. Until then, take care of yourselves and maybe go a little easier on the body spray. I'll see you soon.